and then I'll stop talking when 30 minutes are over. So, this was my title originally. It says, a chat pedagogy retrospective. What does it mean to engage in a socio-cultural approach to writing instruction? But I thought another title would be a rumination on paying attention. Because I think that in the end, that's what socio-cultural curriculum and pedagogy does. It asks us to pay attention to a lot more shit than just what gets written on a piece of paper in a writing class. And that's why it's important, and that's why it matters that we keep working with it and trying to understand how to do it well. Okay, so that's the, for any of you, that's like a little private joke with this Friday chat man from one of my articles. It's supposed to mean that chat goes everywhere and looks at everything, but it just looks like a weird Friday. Okay, so when I said I wanted to do this, I first thought I wanted it to be a swan song, and then I looked that up on the internet and found out that the definition is a last act or manifestation of someone or something of farewell appearance. And I was like, well, I'm not really going anywhere, A. And B, I hope to keep working with this stuff for a long time, even though I'm not going to be the writing program director, so that's a sucky word. My swan, see, I made a little poem. So then I came up with the word interregnum. And that was very funny because the first definition was the interval of time between the end of a sovereign's reign and the succession of a successor. And I thought that was really funny, but I was like, that's not really a good definition. But the second and third ones are good. A period of temporary suspension of the usual functions of government or control. A gap in continuity, and that's the one that I like a pause. For us to just think for a minute, what does this mean? What will it mean to the writing program? Not so much that I'm not there, but to keep going with these ideas, right? What do we want these ideas to turn into? I also want to apologize. You see how it's not working right, like how some of the words are turning over? I didn't do that. I had to turn it into a PowerPoint from a keynote to put it on here, and it screwed up my spacing. So that wasn't me being a bad visual designer. That's the software. Okay, if you don't know about some of the terms I'm going to use tonight, it's okay because some of you, if you're here from a one-on-one class or a writing program class, you probably have heard some of these terms in your classes. If you haven't, you can always find out more about what I'm talking about if you go to our website, iswriting.com. And I mentioned that because I didn't want to give a whole, like, here's what chat is talk, because I thought that would be boring to all the people who already know. So I'm moving on. Okay. All right, so again, spacing at the top, not my fault. Here's how I want to start. In 2007, I worked on an article, which most of you know about if you've been here. It was called Resituating and Remediating the Canons of Cultural Historical Remapping of Rhetorical Activity. Fancy. And I'm the little red right down from the core text. We made a digital text, and a whole bunch of people participated, and we all made small text. So those of you who've taken 402 and are teaching in our program, you've read the chat portion of this, the core text of this, and that is where all of this started. So I wanted to read to you a thing because I think it's funny. You ready? It's not really funny. It'll just be funny how it won't make any sense to you probably. Okay, so in this article, when you go into it, it's like, about chat or something like that. That's like one of the little headers you can read. So I went there and I cut out part of that and I'm going to read it to you. Chat, meaning, for those of you who don't know, cultural historic activity theory, rejects the notion that human action is governed by some Neoplatonic realm of rules, whether the linguistic rules of English, the communicative norms of some discourse community, or cognitive scripts for acting in a particular situation. It argues that activity is situated in concrete interactions that are simultaneously improvised locally and mediated by historically provided tools and practices. Those tools and practices range from machines, made objects, semiotic means, for example, languages, genres, iconographies, and institutions to structured environments, domestic animals and plants, and indeed, people themselves. Mediated activity involves externalization, speech, writing, the manipulation and construction of objects and devices, and co-action with other people, artifacts, and elements of the socio-material environment, as well as internalization, perception, learning. I thought that was funny because I was like, what? What? Now, I feel like if I slow down, I understand that text. But I don't think when I contributed a text to this collection that I really fully understood what that meant. And I don't think it works very well as like a core text for a writing program. Because it's too hard to parse and it doesn't really help us understand what we're trying to do as teachers. So when I participated, I created a text called Constructing a Big Text, Developing a Multimodal Master Plan for Composition Instruction. And I want to point out that that word multimodal, that's what I was doing in 2007, right? I wasn't doing cultural historical activity theory or socio-cultural theory, I was doing multimodal theory. But when I worked on this article with all these people, I thought, oh, this is bigger. This new stuff is so much bigger, and it looks at so many more things than just multimodality. So I got sucked in. And one of the things that I thought was interesting about that is then I said in my talk, I was working at that time at Western Michigan University, and I said, I wonder if you could apply this theoretical shit to a whole writing program. Like, it wouldn't just be one teacher doing a thing, it would be a whole program that took this as its foundational understanding. I don't know, I said, I wonder if someone would let me do that. And then Illinois State called me and they said, we would like you to apply for our job. So I did, and I came and I said, I'm going to do this crazy shit here. Would you like that? Because if you wouldn't, don't hire me. I actually said that. And they apparently said either they didn't care or they thought it was cool, and they hired me. So I came here in 2009, and this is a little cut off, but I'll read it to you. So to me, I put that, you are here where? Because you read that thing on chat and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. No one could teach writing from that idea. So here's my version of trying to explain this in a little bit clearer way, but also a way that kind of talks about what it means to us as teachers, what it means to us as writers. So writing is complicated because it can only be clearly understood as it exists in specific situations, created by specific humans and non-humans. My dog, I'm thinking, can communicate with me, using specific kinds of tools, and this means that when we teach writing, we need to account for that complexity. We need to attend to it in every aspect of our classroom spaces and activities. So not just saying more kinds of multimodal writing, but more ways of thinking about what it means to communicate in the world. In our assignments and in our conversations and in our documentation of what we do, in what we produce and in how we assess. So now you have the beginning. That's where we started. So this is a map. For those of you who don't know, our space in 133 didn't exist when I got here. It was a set of rooms that belonged to someone else, and then they gave it to me, which I thought was super cool. So one of the things that's happened in the last decade is we have a space. We have a space that we use for teachers. They have a teacher's lounge. We have a tech room. We have rooms for our interns. Another thing we have is our website, which didn't exist when I got here. So all the website and everything on it is new in the last decade. We have resources. So these are just examples of a couple of the resources. This is from our Professional Literacies project, where we have people come in and talk about the kinds of writing they do in the world. We have podcasts. This is an example of a podcast from our undergraduate interns who do podcasts about writing as it exists outside of 101 classes. We have created resources that include articles that we try to write so that our teachers who aren't chat theory people can understand why they want to do this and why it might matter to them. And most importantly, we have our grassroots journal, which didn't exist when I got here. I was doing things kind of like it at Western, but it didn't exist until the year after I got here. So it's now in its 9th year. And it was invented here at Illinois State University. So when I look back and I think, what does that mean? I think, well, this is a thing that didn't exist before, and now it does. Okay, so one of the other things we produced is coming out of that article that Paul Pryor and the rest of us wrote. There were these terms that were supposed to be this remaking of thinking in broader ways about how to move away from the rhetorical situation and think a little bit more concretely about all the things that impact what we write and how we write and where we write in the world. And so these are our chat terms. I will not go over them because I bet all of you are tired of them. But these are the chat terms. They came out of that article. That article included more things, but this is the piece of that article that we really picked up. And we've been working on it now, so we're the experts on these terms. There isn't anybody else who's really working with these specific terms in this way. So I think that's interesting, and I thought I would share that that is something new. Didn't exist before. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what are the lessons I think we've learned. And I guess that's because I'm such a teacher, right? Like, I'm like, what are the lessons we've learned here? I could teacher, inspirational preacher, I don't know, but like, what are our lessons? So when I think of the terms that our program uses, which include our CHAT literate activity terms, which we call pedagogical chat, and terms like uptake and transfer and trajectory, so terms that we've either invented or we've come up with our version of them, antecedent knowledge. Most of these aren't terms that we invented, they're more terms that we picked out of the whole plethora of terms out there to describe activity in the world, and we use them because we like them. Some of them stuck and some of them over the years did not stick. So we have ones that we use now. What does it mean to use these terms, and what are the lessons we've learned about coming up with new terms and ideas to create a program? I think we've learned that the specific terms we use might not matter so much. You could use different ones than the ones we're using. Because the whole point of the terms is to help you look at literate activity in a complex way. So we could just make up brand new words if we wanted to, right? Some people don't like the word ecologies, they think it's weird. Some people like other terms better, it doesn't matter. What our assessments have shown us is that whatever terms teachers take up in a robust way and ask students to use and think about, those are the ones students remember. They don't remember all of them. If you do all of them and give them quizzes, you could give them quizzes all day long, and they're not going to remember them all. They're only going to remember the ones that resonate for them. So that's actually a lesson, right? As teachers, we can't think it's about the terms. We just use the terms to get at the information we're trying to see. And you also have to remember that your students won't pick up all the terms. They'll use the ones that matter to them, and paying attention to which terms they're picking up and why is one of the things we need to do as teachers. So another concept I wanted to talk about a little bit was rhetorical genre studies. I'm not going to go into what all these things mean, because you don't need that. But this is a thing that's come up this year. So this is my 10-year retrospective. What do we know about genre that we didn't used to know? And I think, here's what I've got. Genres do exist as typifications of kinds of text that reoccur in response to situations, right? So this is a thing we know. Genres aren't static. They exist in the world in response to how people use them. They don't stay stable over time. But they are also not just not stable, but constantly in flux. As Anne Friedman says, the action, the significance is in the uptake. It's in that space, that gap between the way different people are using and taking up a text, right? So that fits in. That's an understanding of rhetorical genre studies that fits in with socio-cultural theory, right? It totally destabilizes genres, and it also brings people into the mix, right? If I say I'm having a talk, and you think I'm having a boring rant, then those are two different genres, and that's a conflict that's going on right now, whether I think it is or not, right? Okay, so we understand genres in that way, and that is actually moving a little bit away from some of the more standard genre theory stuff. Oops. So, lessons learned about genre. It's not enough to study genres as if they are static categories that can be defined definitively. In other words, you can't go, let's make a Twitter feed, and we'll analyze what Twitter feeds look like, and then we'll be successful Twitter users. You can do that, but you can't just do that. It's also not enough to say, well, genres change, so Twitter's not stable. Okay, we're done. Right? You can't just give up, right? So what I think is that instead we probably need to focus more on the idea that, and I'm quoting one of our graduate students, Liz Calero, in saying we change genres as we use them and they change us. And I think that's cool. So if you want to know what Joyce Walker thinks about why we teach socio-cultural theory, it's because that's cool. That we change genres and they change us. As Friedman explains, genres are also not neutral. This is the scary part of genres, right? They're not neutral, or empty forms that you just put meaning into that have some impact but not that much. When we create or participate in a text, we enter an activity system, and our intentions and actions can conflict with other agents that are also acting in that system. So genres are powerful, as Mijan was saying earlier, right? Genres can be colonial, genres can shape us. But also, as we move into using a genre in a space, we're not just using the genre, we're changing the genre as we use it. Uptake and transfer. Again, I'm not going to explain these terms, but if you don't know them, look them up on our website. Uptakes are divergent. This is a quote from Joyce R. Walker. that she gave a talk at SELVES in 2017 where she got real mad at people understanding transfer as if it's just another way to talk about you learn this here, you use it there. And I thought that was kind of dumb, and so I gave a talk where I said, I don't think that's how uptake works. So uptake and transfer are really about how we learn, what we are coming to know when we're encountering new stuff, and how we use that stuff in the world, right? So I said uptakes are divergent, and then, and I quote myself, it may be helpful for us to broaden our understanding of what uptake looks like, and additionally to shift our understanding of uptake from a straightforward continuum of less to more complete or good, to one that tries to account for the context of the learning and assesses its interconnectivity. So that is the thing I think we've learned about transfer and uptake that you might not hear if you hear other people in the field talking about it, although you will hear some people. So, lessons learned. As instructors, why would we care about this? When you are teaching, somebody is usually learning. Somebody in this room is learning something right now. But what they are learning rarely, if ever, matches up with what you intend. So I feel like that's a socio-cultural lesson that we just need to go ahead and accept that truth and move on, right? So what do we want to do with that? Well, here's what I came up with for my second point. One of the best ways to find out what people are learning, or what they already know, or how they would like to learn, is to ask them. So stop assuming that you are teaching and they are learning, and start talking about what's going on when we learn. Next point. We need to set up learning environments that make sharing this information a fundamental aspect of what it means to learn. So that's our proof of learning, that's our uptake documents, that's the way we talk about genre. Those are things that we do because we think that matters, and not every program does that, right? Not every program talks about learning in those ways. And you could talk about things besides writing in that way too, but you know, we're the writing program, so that's what we talk about. Okay, next lesson. All of a sudden it's very funny to me that I call them lessons. As writers, here's the thing that we could think about based on uptake and transfer. When you're learning something new, always remember that what you know now is only ever partial. And I actually got this from Sue Yin, who's one of our guests this weekend, from her You Are Here doc at the end of the semester. What you know now is only ever partial. It's made up of what you have known and what you may yet come to know. So it behooves all of us to pay attention, not just to what we think we know, but to where that knowledge came from and how it shapes what we do, and how we might want or need to keep learning. Most traditional programs that teach writing do not teach writing in that way. That is something that is unique to our program, and without sociocultural theory, we probably wouldn't have gotten there. So that's a point for sociocultural theory. Okay, Shane, I was thinking of you. Writing selves. Here's a quote. Selves are constantly changing. From a sociocultural perspective, a self is made up of the world that it lives in, the things that it comes to know, and also layers and layers and layers of that knowledge built up into a thing we call us that isn't really any more stable than a genre. And I also think that's cool, because it means we can change. And given our current political climate, I think that's probably not a bad thing. Also, another quote. Finally, the origin, nature, and content of identity is social and cultural. It is not something that is somehow hardwired within a person, but rather it emerges as a product of the irreducible tension between the person and their environment. So please keep in mind, that doesn't mean the social controls us, and it doesn't mean we're living in our own world, right? It means that the movement back and forth between those things is what makes us us. Now we get to lessons learned. Our identities and how we live them bodily are incorporated into our behaviors, and we use them both unconsciously and consciously to construct ourselves in different settings. We communicate our evolving identities through all kinds of different genres. Since our identities and learning are deeply tied together, our curriculum in the writing program needs to understand that identity making as a human activity is intrinsically interconnected with our literate activities, right? So we're not people over here and writers over here. And our program needs to not just understand that theoretically, but understand it in embodied ways, how we teach, how we ask students to think about themselves as writers. I probably didn't say that as well. I think a lot about identity, but it's really hard to get at the emotional content of what makes a me within a socio-cultural system. But I want us not to forget that that's something that we do that a lot of cultural historic activity theory does not do, right? It's a critique of that theory, that it thinks about the social instead of the individual. But we try to look back and forth between the two, and that's important. Okay. As teachers, this means, strangely enough, that thinking about how to assess identity-making activity is important. Now, isn't that weird? Who would do that in a writing class? I thought it was weird when I wrote it down. We need to think about both how we design assignments so that identity-making becomes a visible part of our work, and we need to think about how students can use that knowledge to better understand their uptake. So in other words, in order to understand what you know, you have to understand who you are, and that has to be going back and forth all the time. In 402 this semester, we've had some great conversations about that. I think better than we've ever had before. So I consider that to be an emerging part of our program that I think is very strong. We also need to figure out how to make that learning be part of the grade instead of just grading the product that they produce. Okay, so translingualism. I'm going to give translingualism short shrift this evening because I could talk about it for a long time because I think it's very exciting. But since I knew I was going to run out of time, I decided to just give this quote that we all kind of liked. A lot of us liked this when we read it this year in 402. Sometimes what looks like a messy text riddled with errors, seeming to ignore the assignment, might be a textual manifestation of the intellectually adventurous, rhetorically challenging work of negotiating the overlap of knowledges, identities, and languages. So one of the things that I will say about lessons learned about translingualism and some other concepts is that all the concepts we're exploring as a program offer us related. So translingualism is actually also a socio-cultural theory, right? Like cultural historic activity theory, it's one of the reasons they dovetail so well together because they're coming out of some similar origins, right? But they're also divergent. As we talked about in class, if you think about translingualism and you think about chat, they take you to different places. And I think it's important to keep building new theories into our theory. It's not just we're not a one-trick pony, right? We're willing to consider any theories that actually help us understand how people come to be writers in the world, right? Except they do have to acknowledge complexity, right? And if they can do that, then they can come to the party. However, as we add terms to our repertoires, we also need to consider whether they are sort of staying within the socio-cultural family. I don't know what that means. But I think I mean complexity. Like it's got to stop saying it has to be this, or it has to be that, or it only goes this way, right? It's got to stay complex. And translingualism is one of the theories that we picked up within the last 5 years that really does that. And I'm really enjoying, one of the things I would say to you all, is that as our theories evolve, we bring in this new stuff and it changes us, right? So not just what we do as teachers and what genres we use, but like what ideas we consider change us. So to me, one of the things I see is that as we take up these ideas and use them, they start to change how we understand what we're doing. And I think that's important, and I think it's important to keep doing that. Okay, so, what time is it? Oh my God, I'm going to end early. It never happens to me. Never happens to me. So we're just calling tonight a big fat win from the get-go. All right, so here's how I wanted to end. In 402, which is the class, for those of you who are undergrads who are here this evening, 402 is the class that all our new teachers take. So they spend a semester in the fall talking about how to teach this stuff, and we don't all do it great the first time we do it, but we're all trying to learn how to do it better. So if you think about 402 as kind of the melting pot where these ideas like come from me into the space, and then they go, and people start going, oh, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if I thought about it this way? And then those ideas become part of what the program does, right? So one of the things I will also say in my swan song / interregnum is that it's not about just things I brought. It's like it was a big potluck and this is the food that I brought and then you guys made new things out of it. And so that's one of the things I think is exciting about our program is that it's structured so that those ideas can come back into play, become new, become more interesting and more exciting. So to close, I just thought I would use at the end of the 402 class, everybody does a You Are Here map. And they just make 1 page or maybe 2 pages that say, here's where I think I am right now, right? So I went back through the 3 years we've been doing it. We'll do it this year for the 4th time. And it just made me so happy to look at them because they're so weird and funky. And so here are some of the genres. Some of these I don't know if that's what the genre is, that's just what I called it. But I got some genres that people produced as part of their 402 maps. So, a graphic novel. A spaceship, the metaphor of a spaceship, traveling to unknown territory with a bunch of freshman students in tow. A cartoon, where if you can't see this, but the little bird cage thing, that's the 5-paragraph essay. There's a bunch of 5-paragraph essays stuck in a big cage while the person's trying to walk down the road and like find something new. A geographical map. And I liked this one just because it's pretty, and it also has a thing called the Great Genre Ocean, which I really enjoyed. The Force Assessment. A jungle. There's a danger zone. I don't know what's in there. And here's the land of I know what I'm doing, which I also really liked. A word find. A craft project, where if you spin the little wheel, different chat terms are visible or not visible. An identity print. So it's just a cutout of a bunch of this person's note with a handprint in the middle that says, I exist here. And for some reason that made me happy. So I included it. A mind map of like just looking at how these terms sort of make their way. And I like this one because the center word, if you can't read it, is confusion, which I thought was apropos. A train, which I also really liked, and which one of our contributors, Suyin, made. And in the back she said that this is the map that she made because she kind of understood like learning to write as a map, and then you get there, and then on the sheet in the back she said, I was so freaking wrong, and then proceeded to spend the entire other side of the sheet saying, it's not like a map where there's a path, it doesn't work like that. It's a journey where you don't know what's going to happen next. Okay, in conclusion, here is my warning. Traditional writing classroom practices that grade product, that think that you can understand what a student knows by looking at an essay they've written. They're like playground bullies. You know, they push us around because everybody says, oh, you're supposed to do it that way, that's how it works. And then we do it that way, and we fail. We fail ourselves, we fail students, we fail writing, right? We fail to see the complexity. And if I had to leave you all with a word, it would be don't give in to the bullies, right? Like, we know that we're onto something. That doesn't mean that what we're doing is perfect, but it means that it's better than that. So, like, let's keep going. And then my final slide, which, for those of you who can't see, it says, this is a genre. Is this a genre? Joyce R. Walker, circa 2008. So this was a picture that was taken in the summer before I came here to Illinois State University with a cardboard cutout of Elvis that was in a bar at a conference that I went to. And so I made somebody take my picture, and when I came here, I used it as my bio picture, and I got in trouble because they said it wasn't serious enough. So when I saw that on my computer today, I was like, okay, I'm going to end my talk with that, and here we are. But I have a final word. You know how I quoted Liz Calero, who many of you know, who's in our program now, and I said, we shape genres and genres shape us. It's not a one-way street. When I saw this slide, I thought, well, that is what I would want to say in conclusion. If I'm a genre, then I've shaped you and you've shaped me. And it's not over, because we keep on the life journey, as Suyin said, and we keep moving. We keep making new genres out of ourselves. I think that's important. And I think the thing that I want to say to you all is next year we're going to have a new director. Most of you will still be here. The thing that I want to say is this person will come and they will shape us. They will shape us with new good ideas, interesting ways of looking at research, new places to go to think about writing, and that's great. But you also have the opportunity to shape this person, to tell them about what we've been doing and what we've learned, and try to help them understand what's valuable about what we're doing, what we might want to change or throw away or bring in that's new. So that sort of is my request for all of you next year, is to just keep remembering that, right? You also shape the genre that is the writing program, and I would like to thank you for having shaped me, because I think that's important. Okay. We have another part of the meeting in which Deb Riggert-Kiefer, who's one of our who's going to be one of our former graduate students next Friday, and Christina Sanchez-Martin, who is a new assistant professor. And so, and they are both going to do what we call, for those of you who don't know about the genre, we call it giving a response. So sometimes someone will give a talk, and then two other people who are interested in the topic will just get up and kind of informally say, okay, so here are my thoughts on what Joyce just said, and some other shit. So you guys will welcome Christina and Deb. They're both going to give a little short spiel, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, or just anything anybody wants to say. So comments also are welcome in addition to questions. So Deb and Christina, if you want to come up, or one of you, or however you want to do it.
And I am soon to be finished. I'm not going to talk for a long time, even though my students probably think that I do. I teach at a middle school. I teach this year's 7th and 8th grade English Language Arts. And when I started here at ISU, the thing that I was really looking for was a better way to approach writing instruction with my students, because no matter what I tried, it seemed to be the same thing. And the map really resonated with me because my students were in, and I was in there with them, in the 5-paragraph essay cage, and we just couldn't seem to break out of it, no matter what we tried. And then I took 402, and there was a whole new life into the kind of instruction that I thought that I could do with my students. And probably the biggest difference that I saw in the ways that I was trying to think about it and use the terms with my students, and the things that we tried in the classes that I have taught since then, were that if students looked at the work that they were doing, the activities that they were engaging in, that they could pay attention to the things that were happening and learn something about their writing and learn something about themselves. And I could learn with them. If I just looked at a final product, all I knew was what they did, but I didn't know why they made those choices. I didn't know what they learned. I didn't know what they already knew coming into the class. And so that really, it changed what they could do, but it really changed what I could do. Not just in the type of grade that they would get, but also in the way that I would plan my instruction for the kinds of things that we did. And so, as Joyce said, that not only did she kind of shape us, we shaped her. It happened in my class as well. So that's what I have to offer you. I don't want to talk for a really long time, but I saw this curriculum as transformative for my students. Thank you.
So I have a plan for what I was going to say, but because this is supposed to be a response to Joyce's talk, I'm going to change that, and I'm just going to talk a little bit about the main things that I was thinking while everyone was talking. So going along with what Deb was saying, for me, at the beginning of the program, like many of you might be experiencing now, it's something new, and as Joyce was saying, it's where the tensions are, where the contradictions, where the negotiations are, where we see learning. So if that is happening, then you're moving forward. In learning to be okay with feeling uncomfortable, that was part of my transformation, my own transformation. And that's what I was trying to also model in my writing classes as well, here and also where I'm teaching at now. One of the things that I kept going back, as Joyce was talking, was the idea of the negotiations, uptake, tensions, right? That also resonates a lot with me because before, when I first came here, as Joyce was, she made a note about that, coming from very traditional understandings of writing, you tend to see things as right or wrong, right? And then when you don't fit in, when you think that you're doing something different, then you see all of those tensions emerging. And shifting the focus from am I doing it right or wrong to what is happening and how am I navigating this, that was the most transformative experience for me. And again, I think that trying to reproduce this with your students in class shows them what learning is like. So again, with the same maybe as doing or writing something that's right or wrong, there's also people who come with ideas of this is what good teaching is like and this is what bad teaching is like, right? We have some expectations and we have some ideologies about what's supposed to be good teaching. So showing all of those tensions, all of those negotiations with your students in class, that you're also figuring out writing, like what is the genre of the response to a talk like? Right?
It helps if the person gives you the talk ahead of time, and
Yeah.
they know you're kind of screwed.
No, no, it's fine. Again, feeling okay with being uncomfortable about learning something new that doesn't fit in a specific clear-cut categories. And for me, it was really interesting to see the connections between socio-cultural theory and translingualism. Like Joyce said, there's some connections, but there's also some divergence. Each of them come from a different tradition. That was seeing the relationship between writing and language as something that is constantly negotiated and in flux. That's something that I try to continue to do in my writing classes, no matter who my students are. And yeah, that's what I have for you.
All right, thank you. Sit here, and then if anybody has any questions, but also comments, like if you have anything that this brought up to you, things you want to say, as opposed to questions you want to ask, I sure would be happy to hear them. And we can do that for 15 minutes, and then we can go home and have an adult beverage. David.
So, as I was listening to the valediction,
Yeah, I wouldn't have used that word, but that's a good one.
I'm thinking about the iterativeness of sort of not only the program but what we teach, like getting students to be comfortable with, okay, you can't just learn how to do this thing. Whenever you encounter the genre in the future, you're again going to have to see what sort of state of flux it's in. So, and I noticed that same thing that I didn't quite see before with how I think about teaching the writing program, how I taught teaching in the writing program, thinking about how, okay, we know how to do this now. We figured it out is exactly the opposite of what we're teaching our students. When I look back at it, it's like we probably changed learning ethics 3 times since I've been here for 5 years, and so we're still figuring it out even after being here for a long time in the program. And so I think the impulse of the new teachers want to be like, okay, I will figure this out this year and I'll be done. I'll have it figured out. But it's sort of the same iterative genre research thing we're teaching our students for. It's always a new class. So we have to be comfortable with that. And it's hard because like Jane and I were talking earlier about job materials. And now I have to go learn how to do this thing, but we're still having to do the genre research as 4th and 5th year students. So
And I thought of 3 things in response to what you were saying, and one is how we've said for a long time in the program there's no such thing as good writing, which is a thing that Deb's students as middle schoolers were like, "Wah!" and it freaked them out and they didn't like it. And then they loved it. And so a second thing I thought of is there's no such thing as mastery, which is a really scary thought, right? That's a horrifying thought. And yet it's also cool. And then the final thought that I had is you're never safe. You know, like, you're not safe. And I tend to focus on the, woo, it's so cool that we become different people. But the fact that you have to become a different person every time you write a thing, that it would be nice to pretend like that's not true. And many human beings in the world spend a lot of their time pretending like that's not true. And then sometimes when you ask them questions and they get into what they really think about themselves as writers, you find out they know it's not true and they're scared to show us, right? So one of the things that we're doing isn't necessarily like a happy dance, but it's true, right? It's a true way of understanding what it really means to try to communicate in the world, which is it's not safe. There's no done. And I think that's important to recognize that that's scary, but it's also true. So why lie to ourselves? Except for the fact that it feels good sometimes. Anybody else? Comments or questions? valedictory speeches.
Going along with that, lying to ourselves, but also one of the assignments that we're doing in our team is by not looking at the complexities of writing or language. One idea was that those bullies actually used to discriminate, to
Speak out to them.
yeah, I was just saying that going along with that, not just are we lying to ourselves, but also through our teaching, what ideologies are we perpetuating that are used by the bullies to continue to discriminate, to separate, to just say you get to be in this class, whereas you get to be in the upper levels, or you get to move on and have this job and you don't. So not doing that, by not looking at the complexities, are we perpetuating those ideologies? And helping the bullies to continue being bullies.
Are you saying this not just in the classroom but outside of the school?
I'm specifically thinking about teaching ideologies or ideologies that we bring into our classroom, like myths of what it means to be
Good reader,
right.
and those myths accumulate over time. They don't just start, they don't spring out of nowhere. The student who gets the happy face in second grade still is probably the student who's really pretty good about their writing by the time they're in 8th grade. And when they find out that they're not a good writer, that makes them pretty uncomfortable, but it can be pretty liberating for the kid who is all along never thought that they were a good writer, but knew stuff about their writing, and maybe always learned those things about their writing, but were never asked to examine what they needed to do that would address those things that had gotten in their way.
Anybody else? Oh.
I mean, we're
First of all, I feel so like blessed that I'm here because I was like happy to be with you this 1 year in the writing program. Yeah.
You can tell that to everybody next year when I'm not here anymore. But don't say that because they'll make the new person feel bad. So we want to
Yeah, it was amazing. It was amazing introduction. And I think I was lucky actually to be here. And I think that Ukraine and Europe, the part of the world that I come from, they absolutely need people with your energy at universities because no Ukraine, no universities have this kind of approach. Because English is taught as like placed in these levels, yeah, like universities, exams, like certification, like dividing people, you can, that's it. And they need this approach. And this is a whole new territory for you on the school.
Well, one of the things I will say is a whole new territory for you on Export, right? I wish Licia Saloni had been able to be here tonight, but there were childcare issues. But if she had been here, she could tell you the story about how she went back to Turkey, which is where she's from. She's a professor here, and she was teaching students in this kind of model, talking about it, and all these were in-service or pre-service teachers in Turkey, and they all literally just about cried when she was saying, oh, we don't need to write the 5-paragraph essay anymore. And they were like, no, we're good at that. We know that's writing, right? That's what they're going to want when our students go to the U.S. So one of the things I think is really interesting is these things aren't just in the United States, and they are political. Genres are political. Ideas about who gets to be an expert are political. But it's also true that what I like about this curriculum is it does two things, right? One, it sort of can help you push against those politics, but it's also just a really practical way for going, oh shit, I don't know how to do this, what should I do next, right? And I like that it can do both. So if you're uncomfortable thinking big picture thoughts about, I can challenge who gets to be a good writer in the world, you can go, I just want to write this job application letter and I just want to know how to do it, right? And I want to be able to tell myself that even though this might not be perfect, I know that I've used some of the tools that I learned for learning about new genres, and I'm pretty sure I'm getting there. So I feel like a lot of those conversations could happen in a lot of ways, and you don't even really have to use the word socio-cultural to get there. But I think sometimes if we don't keep bringing the theory in, and I'm sorry this metaphor if it's offensive to people, but I feel like the traditional classroom playground bullies, like they just win. Unless we have something to back us up when we say these things, right? Unless we have ways of actually looking at how learning happens that we can use to like talk about this stuff, which is why I think it's important to invent these terms and to talk to people about them. Erica?
That was actually what I was thinking of, like during your whole speech, where this aspect of genres are always in flux, and teaching is always in flux, and our identity. And so my first year here, this is my 5th year, my first year teaching. And so like, if you would have told me like, teach essays, I was like, oh, that's nice, but I told nothing about what I should actually be doing in my classroom. And then he's like, well, here's chat, and here's 7 terms, and here's how you work. I'm like, oh, okay, like here's a framework that I can build my whole course design around. So I think like that was helpful to me, versus like persuasive, argumentative, go out into the world. Like, and it's telling me nothing, right? So I think like it's funny that it's all about being static, and yet I found it foundational and grounding to have the theory as well.
Yeah, it's complicated. I don't have an answer to that. I agree, but I don't know why that works that way. Anybody else?
So I'm sitting here as somebody who has no idea where I'm going to be next year, what kind of writing program I might be part of. I'm thinking about the last 3 or 4 years here as you're going over that. And I've been in programs where you pretty much have everything spelled out for you. There's no guesswork. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's no reason to fear because someone will do it for you. And so I just want to say thank you for creating a space that makes us afraid, because I think you have to be afraid in order to learn something. And you come in and you look at chat by itself, there's 7 terms, and you look at your 9 learning outcomes. And it's a lot in the beginning, but I personally think that kind of fear and excitement can be the 2 sides of the same coin. And so what you are afraid of in year 1, just one of those things can be the thing that excites your work by year 4. So you don't have to be a master at all of it, but just be happy that you're in a space that is so wide that you don't know if you can adventure that whole space. It's better than being trapped in a small space, but it's hard to be the person who says, let me every year scared of new people that come in. Let me but I am glad.
Yeah, you think it would be fun, but really it makes me feel bad. So, yeah. Okay, anybody else? All right, we're gonna go ahead and call it because it's late at night.